Get off my land. I charged down the hill so fast, my boots kicked up dust clouds, lungs burning, fists clenched. The chainsaw screamed one final time before going silent, and there she stood. Karen Mitchell, HOA president of Oak Ridge Heights. Arms crossed, sunglasses reflecting my rage back at me, wearing that venomous smile that said she'd just corrected the universe. Behind her, my family's bridge, the last thing I built with my dad before cancer took him, lay in pieces in the creek. 15 years of memories reduced to splinters floating in the water. What the hell do you think you're doing? I roared, stopping 5 feet from her, close enough to see my reflection in those designer sunglasses. Removing a safety hazard, she said, voice dripping with authority. Behind her, 3 workers in hard hats scrambled for their trucks like rats abandoning ship. This structure violated community standards. Community standards? The words exploded out of me. Lady, I'm not in your goddamn HOA. This is my bridge on my farm on my 50 acres that your neighborhood doesn't even touch. She didn't flinch. Just stood there in her red blazer, expensive heels sinking into the soft earth while my father's work floated away behind her. Anything visible from HOA property falls under our jurisdiction, she said, calm as someone ordering coffee. I'm calling the sheriff right now. Her smile widened, and I saw something in it that made my blood run cold, absolute certainty that she'd get away with this. Go ahead, Mr. Davidson. Please do. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a bridge. This was war. And Karen Mitchell had just made the catastrophic mistake of thinking a 5th-generation cattle rancher would roll over because she said so. My name is Cole Davidson. I'm 42 years old, and I've been working this land since before I could spell my own name. What I'm about to tell you is how one power-drunk HOA queen tried to destroy my family legacy and how I buried her so deep in consequences she'll never see daylight again. The bridge wasn't fancy, just 20 feet of rough-cut timber spanning the creek that marked my northern boundary. Simple, functional, built to last. But it was the last thing I built with my dad before cancer took him. Summer of 2010. Dad was still healthy, still strong. We'd planned that bridge together over winter, drew up sketches at the kitchen table, calculated load-bearing requirements. I can still remember that Saturday in June when we started. Dad standing in the creek in his old waders, water flowing around his knees, holding the support beam absolutely level while I drove bolts from above. You're overthinking it, Cole. He'd grinned. Sometimes you just gotta trust the wood and do the work. Mom brought sandwiches around noon. We ate lunch sitting on the half-finished rails, feet dangling over the water, Dad talking about craftsmanship and legacy. You build it right, he'd said, watching the creek flow, and it'll be here long after we're gone. That's what matters, that it serves its purpose and lasts. That's legacy. 6 months later, the cancer diagnosis came. Stage 4, inoperable. He died in March 2011. That bridge became more than just a way to cross the creek. It was Dad's voice, Mom's laugh, the last normal day before everything changed, proof we could build something together that would outlast both of us. And now it lay in pieces, chainsawed to death by a woman who thought aesthetics mattered more than memories. I stood there staring at the wreckage, splintered planks, severed support beams, the railing I'd sanded by hand reduced to kindling. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from the kind of cold rage that makes every thought crystal clear. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers taught me something valuable. When someone attacks your position, you don't flail around screaming. You assess the damage. You document everything. You identify your enemy's weaknesses. You plan your counterattack with precision. Then you execute without mercy. Karen Mitchell had just attacked my position. She had no idea what she'd started. I pulled out my phone and started recording. My voice came out calm, controlled, factual. This is Cole Davidson, property owner at 2847 County Road, 16 Gwinnett County, Georgia. May 14th, 2025. approximately 7:45 a.m. I'm standing on my private property looking at what remains of my footbridge. That bridge had been standing here for 15 years. I built it with my father in 2010. I panned the camera slowly, capturing everything. The destroyed structure, fresh sawdust coating the water like snow. Clean chainsaw cuts proving this was professional demolition. That woman standing on my creek bank is Karen Mitchell, president of the Oak Ridge Heights HOA. I zoomed in on her face. She'd gone very still, finally realizing maybe this wasn't going how she'd planned. She hired a construction crew to trespass on my property and destroy this bridge without my permission, without legal authority, without any jurisdiction. My property is not part of her HOA. Never has been, never will be. She knew that. She did it anyway. I lowered the phone slightly but kept recording. Karen, you need to leave my property. Now. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen Mitchell's confidence cracked. You're being unreasonable, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. That bridge was dangerous, old, unstable. Someone could have gotten hurt. The community that isn't on my land and has no right to be here? I kept my voice cold. You destroyed my property because you didn't like looking at it. That's vandalism. It's a crime. It was a public safety issue. It was on private property, my property, which you have no authority over. I stepped closer. Get off my land before I have you arrested for trespassing. For 1 second, Karen's mask dropped completely. Not the confident HOA president, just someone scared, realizing they'd gone too far. Then the mask came back. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted her sunglasses, smoothed down her blazer with trembling hands. This isn't over, Mr. Davidson. You're absolutely right, I replied. It's not. Not even close. She turned and walked away, those expensive heels catching on rocks, her stride less certain. I watched her disappear into her perfect neighborhood. Then I turned back to the creek and started the real work. I photographed everything from every angle. Wide shots, close-ups of chainsaw cuts, the debris field, boot prints in the mud, tire tracks. Near where the trucks had parked, I found something perfect. A contractor's badge, metal with a company logo, Hillside Construction and Demolition Services. I sealed it in a plastic bag and added it to my collection. This wasn't just evidence of who'd done the work. It was proof that would lead directly back to Karen. 6 years of combat engineering had taught me to think clearly under pressure, to identify the single critical weakness that will bring down an entire fortified position. Karen thought she'd destroyed my bridge and asserted her authority. What she'd actually done was commit multiple felonies on camera and hand me everything I needed to destroy her completely. I walked back to the farmhouse, uploaded everything to cloud storage, 3 separate backup locations, and made 2 phone calls that would change everything. First, Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office. I need to report property destruction and criminal trespassing. Someone just demolished a structure on my property without permission. Is the person still on your property, sir? No, they left when I said I was calling you. But I have video evidence showing who ordered it, physical evidence from the scene, and I know exactly who hired the crew. A deputy would be out within the hour. My second call was to the only lawyer I knew who would actually enjoy this fight. Rebecca Walsh answered on the 3rd ring. Cole Davidson. It's been a while. What's going on? Rebecca, I've got a situation. HOA president hired a crew to trespass on my property and destroy my footbridge with chainsaws. Long silence. Then, can you say that again? Slowly. I explained everything. The Oak Ridge Heights development. Karen's 6 months of threatening letters claiming jurisdiction over my property. The escalation to hiring contractors for demolition. Rebecca listened without interrupting, which meant she was already building the case in her mind. When I finished, she whistled low. Cole, do you have documentation? Video of the destroyed bridge with Karen supervising. Photos from every angle. Physical evidence including a contractor's badge. 6 months of threatening letters. Timeline of escalating harassment. The whole package. Email me everything immediately. She paused, and I heard the smile in her voice, the kind a shark gets smelling blood. Cole, they just committed property destruction, criminal trespassing, and potentially conspiracy on property they have zero jurisdiction over. This is the kind of case I dream about. What about Karen personally? If we can prove she knew she had no authority and did this anyway, which we definitely can, she's personally liable. Not just the HOA. Her. And depending on what the sheriff finds, she could be looking at criminal charges. This isn't just civil anymore. This is felony territory. After we hung up, I should have felt relieved, vindicated, but all I felt was hollow. I walked back to the creek, moving slowly this time. The debris field was larger than I'd realized. Pieces of the bridge had washed 50 yards downstream. One of the support posts, the one Dad had insisted on setting himself, lay snapped in half on the bank, the wood splintered like broken bones. I knelt down and picked up a piece of the railing. The wood was smooth from 15 years of weather. There were marks I recognized, a gouge where I had dropped a toolbox initials. Dad had scratched into the underside, TJD, for Thomas James Davidson. And that's when it hit me. I'd lost the last physical thing Dad and I had built together. The last place I could go to remember that Saturday working side by side. Karen Mitchell hadn't just destroyed a bridge. She'd destroyed a memory, a connection, proof that we'd existed together. I sat down on the creek bank, still holding that piece of railing, and I broke. Not angry, crying, the deep, wrenching sobs that come from grief you didn't know you were carrying. For Dad, for 15 years gone, for everything cancer had stolen, and now for this final piece Karen had taken. My dog, Copper, a blue heeler who'd been Dad's before he died, came down from the house and pressed against my side, whining softly. I sat there until the tears stopped, until the sun was high, until my grief had processed into something colder and harder. Determination. Dad used to say, when someone knocks you down, you got two choices. Stay down and let them win, or get up swinging. And Davidsons don't stay down. I stood up, still holding that piece of railing, and looked at the destroyed bridge one more time. Then I looked toward Oak Ridge Heights on the hill, where Karen probably thought she'd won. She had no idea what she'd started. Everything she'd built, her authority, her reputation, her little kingdom was about to come crashing down. Deputy Marcus Harris arrived exactly 1 hour later, pulling up in his cruiser with calm efficiency. Mid-40s, solid build, weathered face that said he'd grown up in farm country. He stepped out, took one look at the destroyed bridge, and whistled. Somebody really did a number on that. Karen Mitchell, HOA president from Oak Ridge Heights. I gestured toward the development. She hired a professional crew, supervised it personally. I've got it all on video. Harris's eyebrows went up. And you're not part of their HOA? Never have been, never will be. I showed him the county property maps, the surveyed boundaries clearly marked, the HOA plat showing their development stopping well short of my land. She just decided that anything she could see belonged under her control. Harris shook his head. That's not how property law works. Like, at all. I showed him everything. The video, the photos, the contractor's badge, the timeline of 6 months of harassment. Harris spent an hour doing his own documentation. Professional, methodical, evidence collection that would hold up in court. When he finished, he looked at me seriously. Mr. Davidson, this is clear-cut criminal destruction of property. Possibly conspiracy if she coordinated with contractors knowing she didn't have legal authority. With your video and physical evidence, we've got enough to pursue felony charges. The crushing weight on my chest loosened slightly. What happens next? I'm filing a full report today. The DA will review it. If they decide to prosecute, and with this much evidence, they probably will, Mrs. Mitchell is looking at serious charges. Criminal trespassing, property destruction, possibly fraud if she misrepresented her authority. Multiple felonies. Good, Harris studied me. One question. What's your next move? I looked at the destroyed bridge. Dad's bridge now reduced to splinters. Then I looked back toward the development where Karen probably thought she'd gotten away with it. I'm going to rebuild. Stronger than before. And then I'm going to sue Karen Mitchell and her HOA for every penny it costs. And then I'm going to make damn sure she never does this to anyone else ever again. Harris smiled slightly. My brother runs a timber supply company. I'll give him your number. Friends and family discount. I'd appreciate that. After Harris left, I walked back down to the creek one more time. The water kept flowing around the debris, indifferent to human drama. But something had shifted in me. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but it had been converted into something colder, harder. Determination, purpose, a goal. Karen thought she'd won. Thought she'd removed an eyesore and asserted her authority. What she'd actually done was commit multiple crimes on camera and hand me enough legal ammunition to destroy her completely. She'd started this war thinking I was just another property owner she could bully into submission. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with someone who'd spent 6 years learning exactly how to identify weaknesses in fortified positions and apply precisely calibrated force to bring them crashing down. Karen Mitchell's reign was about to end, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching it collapse. The contractor badge turned out to be even more valuable than I'd hoped. The next morning, I called Hillside Construction before they even opened. Hillside Construction, this is Jeremy. Yeah, you had a crew working near Oak Ridge Heights yesterday morning. Demolition job on a footbridge. Brief pause. Tension in the silence. Who's calling? The property owner whose bridge your crew just destroyed. The one your client lied to you about having authority over. That was criminal trespassing and property destruction on private land. And I've got one of your workers' badges with your company logo on it. Longer pause. Muffled conversation. Someone saying, "Oh shit," loud enough to carry through the line. Sir, look. We were hired by the HOA president. She showed us authorization documents. Karen Mitchell showed you HOA letterhead, not property ownership documents. She doesn't own my land. Your crew committed felonies because she lied to you. And right now, you're accessories, whether you meant to be or not. We just do what we're hired to do. I found badge number 347 inches my grass, I said, voice level but hard. Along with tire tracks, boot prints, and chainsaw marks I can probably match to your equipment. I've got video of the entire demolition. Either you tell me exactly what Karen told you and provide copies of whatever authorization she showed you, or I hand all this evidence to the sheriff and let him sort out your company's criminal liability. Your choice. Make it quick. Dead silence. Then, hold on, let me get my boss. More muffled conversation. Then, a different voice, older, more authoritative. This is Frank Hillside. You're telling me we demolished something on non-HOA property? Your crew destroyed a 15-year-old footbridge on my private farm. Karen Mitchell told you she had authority. She lied. My property isn't part of her HOA and never has been. Jesus Christ. Frank sounded genuinely distressed. She showed us HOA architectural review approval forms, said the structure was abandoned and dangerous within their easement area. We asked specifically about property ownership. She assured us the HOA owned the creek access as part of the development's water rights. Did she show you property surveys, county maps, deed records, anything proving actual ownership? No, just internal HOA documents on official letterhead. Look, Mr. Davidson. Mr. Davidson, we were lied to. We do jobs for HOAs all the time, remove old structures, clean up properties. We always verified jurisdiction through the HOA's legal documentation. She had everything that looked official. If we'd known this was private property completely outside their authority, we never would have touched it. Then you need to document everything she told you, everything she showed you, and provide it to the sheriff. Because right now, you're accomplices. If you cooperate and prove you were deceived, you become witnesses instead of criminals. But you need to decide which side you're on very quickly. We'll cooperate fully, Frank said quickly. I'm pulling our work order file right now. We've got her signed authorization, copies of the documents she provided, communication records, everything. I'll have my attorney contact the sheriff today. Mr. Davidson, I'm truly sorry. We were used as tools to commit a crime. That's not how we do business. Good. Because Karen Mitchell is going down for this, and you don't want to go down with her. After I hung up, I called Deputy Harris and gave him Hillside's contact information. He sounded pleased. This is excellent, Mr. Davidson. If the contractors were deceived with false documentation, they're witnesses to fraud rather than co-conspirators. And if Mrs. Mitchell provided fake authorization claiming HOA ownership, that's fraud and forgery on top of everything else. We're building a serious case here. The pieces were falling into place. Karen had lied to professional contractors, forged authorization documents, and committed her crimes with enough arrogance to think she'd never face consequences. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been, but then everything got worse. Not for Karen, for me. Rebecca Walsh's demand letter hit the Oak Ridge Heights HOA office 3 days later via certified mail. Karen called me that same evening, barely controlled fury vibrating in her voice. You cannot seriously think you're going to sue us. I don't think it, Karen. I'm doing it. You destroyed my property without authority. Now you pay to replace it, compensate me for damages, and cover my legal fees. Pretty simple math. That bridge was a safety hazard, endangering the entire community. That bridge was on private property you had zero legal authority over. You knew that because I told you repeatedly for 6 months. You did it anyway. That's a crime, and you're going to face consequences. We were protecting property values and resident safety. Her voice climbed higher. You refused every reasonable attempt to bring your property into compliance. My property doesn't need to comply with your standards because it's not part of your HOA, I said flatly. You decided you didn't like looking at something on someone else's land, so you destroyed it. Now you're going to pay. In money, in reputation, and quite possibly in criminal charges. This is harassment. You're targeting me. Karen, you trespassed, hired contractors using false documentation, destroyed my property with chainsaws, and stood there supervising. I'm not targeting you. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. My lawyers will destroy you in court. Your lawyers are going to have a very hard time explaining how you had authority over property that isn't part of your HOA. Feel free to try. I'll see you in court, Karen. I hung up before she could respond. But Karen wasn't done escalating. Over the next week, she went completely off the rails. First came the drones. 2 days later, I was working in the barn when I heard unusual sound. High-pitched, mechanical whirring. I stepped outside and looked up to see a consumer drone hovering 30 feet above my property, camera pointed down, slowly circling. Professional surveillance, not casual curiosity. I stood in my driveway and raised both middle fingers at the camera. The drone zoomed in on me for several seconds, then zipped back toward Oak Ridge Heights. I called Harris immediately. The HOA is flying drones over my property, conducting surveillance. That's, Harris sighed, actually not illegal if they're in public airspace. Annoying as hell and definitely harassment in context, but not much we can charge them with criminally. But it shows ongoing harassment, right? Absolutely. Document every time. Take photos, note exact times, describe flight patterns. It all builds the case that this is systematic harassment, not a one-time dispute. Over the next 10 days, I documented 4 more drone flights. Each time, I photographed it, noted the time, added details to my harassment timeline. Karen was escalating, getting desperate, trying to find something, anything she could use against me. But every action just gave me more ammunition. Then came the night visitors. Wednesday evening, about 2 weeks after the bridge demolition. I was finishing dinner when Copper started going ballistic at the back door. Not his normal bark. The deep, aggressive warning he only used when something was seriously wrong. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and stepped outside. Copper bounded toward the north fence line, hackles raised, growling continuously. Near the property markers, the exact posts dividing my farm from the HOA development, I saw movement. Two figures crouching in darkness, one holding a clipboard, the other pointing a flashlight at something on the ground. "You two planning to explain what you're doing on my property at 10 p.m. without permission?" I called out. Both figures jumped. One dropped his clipboard. We're conducting a safety inspection," one stammered. "A safety inspection of property that doesn't belong to your HOA?" I moved closer. I recognized them HOA board members. At night? Without the property owner's knowledge? That's criminal trespassing. "Mrs. Mitchell said we needed to document safety hazards. Mrs. Mitchell lied to you, just like she lied to the construction crew. You're trespassing on private property. Turn around and walk away before I call the sheriff and have you both arrested." The second figure, a woman in her 60s, spoke nervously. "Mr. Davidson, we're just following board directives. You have zero legal obligation on my land," I said sharply. "This is my property. You're on the wrong side of the markers. The only thing you're obligated to do right now is leave before you add criminal trespassing charges to whatever Karen's already facing." They didn't argue, just gathered their materials and hurried back toward the development, stumbling in darkness. I stood there for several minutes after they left, Copper still growling. Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was enlisting her board members in criminal activity, getting them to trespass and conduct illegal inspections. These people probably thought they were doing the right thing, following legitimate orders. They had no idea they were committing crimes that could result in arrest. That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, I realized this wasn't going to end with just Karen facing consequences. The entire HOA board had been corrupted by her abuse of authority. When this came crashing down, the fallout would be much bigger than one corrupt HOA president, but that reckoning was still ahead. First, I had to survive what was coming next. The escalation came 3 weeks after the bridge demolition. I'd driven into town for supplies, stopped at Maggie's diner for lunch. The place went quiet when I walked in, that small town thing where everyone knows everyone's business. Maggie leaned across the counter, voice dropping to a whisper. "You hear the news?" "What news?" "Karen filed an injunction yesterday afternoon against you." I nearly dropped my cup. "She what?" "Emergency injunction in county court, claiming you're building dangerous structures, threatening her people, harassing HOA members. Says you need to be stopped before someone gets hurt." Maggie's eyes were eager. This was the kind of drama that became legend. "Says you've got mental health issues and your property poses public safety risks." The audacity was almost impressive. Karen, who destroyed my property, was now claiming I was the dangerous one. "She's got her husband involved too," Maggie continued. "Bradley Mitchell, corporate lawyer from Atlanta. They're saying you're unstable, that you've made violent threats, that your property needs court-ordered inspections." I finished my coffee and drove straight to Rebecca's office. She looked up when I walked in. "You heard about the injunction." "You knew?" "Filed late yesterday. I was planning to call you this morning." She pulled up a document. "It's a disaster for them, Cole. Poorly written, full of unsupported allegations. But it does show they're willing to abuse the court system." "What exactly are they claiming?" Rebecca scrolled through. "That you're building unpermitted structures that pose safety hazards, that you've made threatening statements, that your property contains dangerous conditions. They want a temporary restraining order preventing you from any construction and requiring you to allow HOA safety inspections." She looked at me seriously. "It's complete bullshit. None of it will hold up, but it does mean they're not backing down. Can they actually get an injunction based on lies? Not with the evidence we have. They'd need to prove immediate danger, and they can't because there isn't any. Their own actions completely undermine any claim that you're the dangerous party. But the fact they filed it tells me something important." "What?" "She's scared. Desperate. People don't file frivolous injunctions unless they're panicking. She knows the criminal investigation is happening, knows we're preparing a major lawsuit, so she's trying to muddy the waters, flip the narrative, make you look like the aggressor. Classic abuser tactic. So what do we do?" Rebecca smiled, and it wasn't friendly. It was predatory. We go to the hearing, present our evidence, and watch their case collapse. Then we add malicious prosecution and abuse of legal process to our lawsuit. Every action they take just makes our case stronger. Karen Mitchell is literally building the foundation of her own destruction. The hearing was scheduled for June 15th, 10 days out. Judge Patricia Reeves, presiding, a jurist with 25 years on the bench and zero tolerance for HOA overreach. I spent those 10 days in a strange space between fury and anticipation. Fury at Karen's willingness to lie under oath, but also anticipation, because I knew she was about to walk into a courtroom and face consequences she'd never experienced. Rebecca and I spent hours preparing. She coached me on courtroom demeanor, stay calm, answer directly, don't let Bradley provoke me. We organized our evidence, property documentation, harassment timeline, destruction evidence, false claims analysis. We prepared witness statements from Deputy Harris, from Frank Hillside at the construction company, from neighbors who'd witnessed Karen's harassment. The key, Rebecca explained, is that we're not just defending against their injunction. We're using this hearing to preview our entire case. Every piece of evidence becomes part of the public record. By the time we're done, everyone will understand exactly who Karen Mitchell is. 3 days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Rebecca called me at 7 a.m., barely contained excitement in her voice. "Cole, you need to sit down. I just got a call from someone who could blow this case wide open." "Who?" "Thomas Henderson. He's on the HOA board, been serving 6 years. He says he has information about Karen that we need to know before the hearing." We met Henderson that afternoon. Late 60s, retired accountant, careful and precise. He looked exhausted and deeply troubled. "Mr. Davidson," he said, shaking my hand, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We trusted Karen when she said your property was causing safety concerns. We didn't question her authority because she'd been our president for over a decade." "What changed?" Rebecca asked. Henderson pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "After your lawsuit was filed, I got curious about our financials. Something Karen said bothered me. She mentioned needing to reallocate funds from the reserve account for unexpected legal expenses. That's not how reserve accounts work." He opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets and bank statements. "So I requested copies of our financial records going back 5 years. What I found." He shook his head in disgust. "Karen has been systematically embezzling from the HOA for years. Fake vendor contracts, payments to shell companies that don't exist, consulting fees. She's been paying herself without board approval. I've documented over $200,000 in fraudulent transactions." Rebecca leaned forward. "Can you prove these are fraudulent?" "Absolutely." Henderson pulled out examples. "Here's a payment for $15,000 to Ashford Property Management for architectural consulting. Ashford is Karen's maiden name. I looked up this company. It was registered 3 years ago, lists Karen's cousin as registered agent, has no business address, no employees. It exists only on paper." Here's another. $8,000 to Premier Landscaping Solutions for tree trimming. I called them. "They've never heard of Oak Ridge Heights." He showed us page after page. Payments to companies that didn't exist, services never performed, expenses that couldn't be verified. "But the worst part," Henderson continued, anger and guilt heavy in his voice, "is that she's been exporting this model to other HOAs. She's been offering property management consulting. I found records of $5,000 fees from 17 different HOAs over 3 years. I called a few. Within a year of Karen consulting, they all started running similar schemes. She's literally teaching other HOA presidents how to embezzle." Rebecca and I exchanged looks. This was bigger than we'd imagined. "Mr. Henderson," Rebecca said carefully, "are you willing to testify to this under oath? That's why I'm here. Karen has corrupted our board, stolen from our community, and made us accessories to crimes against Mr. Davidson. Someone needs to stop her." He looked at me directly. "I'm sorry we didn't question her sooner, but I'm ready to help make this right." The hearing was now 3 days away, and we'd just been handed a nuclear bomb. The morning of June 15th, 2025, dawned clear and hot. I'd woken before sunrise, with that electric clarity that comes before important battles, that razor-sharp focus where everything else fades except the goal. I dressed carefully. Clean work jeans, pressed button-down shirt, polished boots. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a working farmer who took his land seriously. The Gwinnett County Courthouse was modest brick building from the 1972nd with squeaky doors and that institutional smell of floor cleaner and old paper. But that morning, it felt like the center of the universe. I arrived 30 minutes early. Rebecca was already there, dressed in a sharp gray suit, documents organized into color-coded stacks. You ready? Been ready since the day she cut down my bridge. The courtroom filled slowly. Deputy Harris in the back row, Frank Hillside with his attorney, local reporters, some of my neighbors for moral support. And then, at 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before start time, Karen Mitchell arrived. She came through the doors like she was walking a red carpet. That crimson-red blazer that had become her signature. Black silk blouse underneath, matching pencil skirt, red heels polished to a mirror shine that clicked against tile like gunshots, her blonde hair pulled back in severe waves, her lips matching her blazer, glossy red, catching the fluorescent light, every detail calculated to project authority, confidence, unshakable certainty that she would win. Behind her came Bradley Mitchell in his $1,000 charcoal suit, silver hair, mid-50s, smooth confidence. And behind them, 3 HOA board members looking decidedly less confident. Pale faces, hunched shoulders, avoiding eye contact. Karen didn't look at me. Just walked to the plaintiff's table with stiff-backed posture, sat down, began arranging papers with theatrical precision. But I was close enough to notice something the rest of the courtroom probably missed. Her hands weren't quite steady. A slight tremor as she smoothed down imaginary wrinkles in her blazer, as she adjusted papers that didn't need adjusting. The mask of confidence was impressive, professional, carefully maintained, but cracks were showing, if you knew where to look. At exactly 10 a.m., the bailiff called out, "All rise," the Honorable Patricia Reeves presiding. Judge Reeves entered, woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, bearing of someone who'd spent 25 years seeing through bullshit and had zero patience for games. She took her seat, surveyed the courtroom, banged her gavel once. "Be seated. We're here for Mitchell and Oak Ridge Heights, HOA versus Davidson. Emergency injunction petition. Mr. Mitchell, you filed this motion. The burden of proof is on you. Proceed." Bradley stood, and I had to admit he was good, smooth, articulate, commanding presence. "Your Honor, thank you. My clients are the Oak Ridge Heights HOA and its president, Karen Mitchell. They are a dedicated community organization committed to maintaining property values and ensuring resident safety. For 6 months, they've attempted to work cooperatively with Mr. Davidson regarding serious safety hazards on his property that directly impact their residents. He presented his case. The bridge was structurally unsafe. The HOA made good faith attempts at resolution. I refused all reasonable requests. I responded with hostility and threats. My property contained multiple dangerous conditions. It was impressive fiction, delivered with confidence. Almost believable if you didn't have evidence proving every word was a lie. Judge Reeves listened without expression, taking notes. When Bradley finished, which took nearly 15 minutes making me sound like a dangerous lunatic, she turned to Rebecca. "Miss Walsh, your response?" Rebecca stood, and her opening was surgical in its precision. "Your Honor, this case is extraordinarily simple. The defendants destroyed private property on land they do not own, do not have any legal jurisdiction over, and have absolutely no authority to regulate. Everything else is noise and misdirection." She let that sink in. Mr. Davidson's property has never been part of the Oak Ridge Heights HOA. The boundary lines are clear and have been recorded with the county for 75 years. Mrs. Mitchell conducted a systematic harassment campaign spanning 6 months. The bridge destruction was captured on video. The contractors were deceived with false documentation. Every allegation in the plaintiff's injunction is fabricated. Judge Reeves's expression shifted from polite attention to genuine interest. Your Honor, we have video evidence, contractor testimony, physical evidence, and a documented pattern of harassment. The plaintiffs aren't seeking protection from genuine danger. They're seeking court protection from consequences of their own criminal actions. Miss Walsh, Judge Reeves leaned forward. You're claiming the defendants committed crimes? Yes, Your Honor. Criminal trespassing, felony property destruction, fraud, and ongoing harassment. There's an active criminal investigation by Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office. The evidence is overwhelming and we're prepared to present it. Bradley jumped in quickly, indignation in his smooth voice. Your Honor, these are extraordinarily serious allegations without any actual proof, Mr. Mitchell. Judge Reeves cut him off with a tone that could freeze lava. Miss Walsh just stated she has video evidence and contractor testimony. Before we go further, I'd like to see this video. Rebecca pulled up her laptop, connected it to the courtroom display. The large screen flickered to life. And there it was. The entire destruction captured in high definition, my creek in early morning light, the bridge that had stood for 15 years, 3 workers with chainsaws cutting through support beams, Karen Mitchell standing on the bank in that crimson blazer, arms crossed, supervising every cut, the sound of chainsaws screaming through courtroom speakers, workers glancing at Karen for direction, her nodding approval. The bridge, collapsing into water in pieces, my voice as I charged down the hill, her calm assertion of HOA authority, my statement that she was trespassing, 3 minutes and 47 seconds, that told the complete story. When the video ended, the courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Bradley looked gut-punched, smooth confidence replaced by the expression of a lawyer who just realized his client had lied about everything. Judge Reeves sat back, removing her reading glasses slowly, studying Karen with an expression between disbelief and disgust. Mr. Mitchell, is that your client standing on Mr. Said? Davidson's property supervising the destruction of his bridge? Bradley swallowed, recovering with visible effort. Your Honor, my client was ensuring removal of a dangerous structure that posed imminent threat. On property she doesn't own? The structure was visible from HOA property and therefore fell under their architectural review authority. Judge Reeves held up a hand, silencing him. Stop. That's not how property law works, Mr. Mitchell. You cannot regulate property outside your association's recorded boundaries just because you can see it from your development. That interpretation would be legally insane and create chaos in property rights across the entire state. Karen's face was flushing red, jaw clenched so tight I could see muscles jumping. The mask of confident authority was cracking. Your Honor. Bradley tried again, voice taking on a lecturing tone. The HOA made extensive good faith efforts. By destroying someone's property without permission or legal authority? Judge Reeves looked at him with genuine incredulity. Mr. Mitchell, I've read your firm's work before. You're better than this. This is straightforward felony property destruction. There's no legal theory that justifies what that video just showed. She turned directly to Karen. Mrs. Mitchell, I'd like to hear from you personally. Did you order the destruction of Mr. Davidson's bridge? Karen stood slowly, adjusting her blazer, lifting her chin in defiance. When she spoke, her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Your Honor, I acted in the best interest of my community. That structure was unsafe, a genuine hazard, and an eyesore that negatively impacted property values for 47 families. Was the bridge located on property belonging to your homeowners association? It was clearly visible from our community and affected our residents' enjoyment. Yes or no, Mrs. Mitchell? Simple question. Was the bridge on land that belongs to Oak Ridge Heights HOA? Long pause. The entire courtroom held its breath. No, but the community standards require no, but. Second question. Did you have any legal documentation, surveys, easements, property records, Anything showing you had authority over Mr. Davidson's land. Karen's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Her lawyer husband was making urgent gestures for her to sit down, to stop talking. She ignored him. Our architectural covenants clearly state that any structure affecting property values. Your covenants don't extend beyond your development's recorded boundaries, Judge Reeves said with icy precision. So let me be absolutely clear. You destroyed a structure on private property outside your jurisdiction without any legal authority, based solely on your personal opinion that it was unattractive? And that's when Karen Mitchell's legendary control shattered completely. Yes! The word exploded out, anger overriding every ounce of self-preservation. That bridge was ugly. Old and weathered, and completely inconsistent with aesthetic standards we've worked for years to establish. It was visible from premium properties and dragged down the entire appearance. Mr. Davidson refused every single reasonable request to remove it or improve it. So yes, I authorized its removal because we have a responsibility, a legal and moral responsibility, to maintain property values. The courtroom erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Even the bailiff looked surprised. Bradley grabbed Karen's arm hard, physically pulling her back toward her seat, hissing something urgent. But it was too late. The words were said, recorded. Part of the permanent court record. Karen wasn't done. She shook off her husband's grip and kept going, voice climbing higher. We can't have run-down farm structures visible from a community where homes cost nearly $1 million. We have standards. We have rules. Mr. Davidson was told repeatedly that his property needed to meet community appearance requirements. Mrs. Mitchell. Judge Reeves's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down immediately. Karen froze mid-sentence, finally realizing what she'd done. Color drained from her face. She sat down slowly, mechanically, like someone in a trance. Judge Reeves let the silence hang for a long, excruciating moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was absolutely frigid. Let the record reflect that Mrs. Mitchell has just admitted, under oath in open court, to ordering destruction of private property based solely on aesthetic preferences without any legal authority, proper documentation, or jurisdictional standing whatsoever. She turned to Rebecca. Miss Walsh, do you have additional evidence? Yes, Your Honor. Extensive additional evidence. Rebecca began systematically presenting our case. 6 months of threatening letters. Contractor statements from Hillside explaining how they'd been deceived. Photos of surveillance drones. Testimony from Deputy Harris about midnight trespassing. Karen's written threat that future structures would be removed without warning. Then Rebecca played her trump card. Your Honor, we'd also like to call Thomas Henderson to testify. He's a member of the Oak Ridge Heights HOA board and has information directly relevant to this case. Henderson took the witness stand, was sworn in, and proceeded to systematically dismantle Karen's entire operation. He explained how he'd become suspicious of the finances, how he'd requested financial records and discovered systematic embezzlement. He presented his analysis showing over $200,000 in fraudulent transactions, fake vendor contracts, payments to shell companies, unauthorized consulting fees. Mrs. Mitchell has been stealing from our community for years, Henderson said, voice heavy with anger and shame. But worse, she's been teaching other HOA presidents how to do the same. We found records of consulting fees from 17 other communities. Within a year of her consulting, they all started running similar schemes. She's exported her fraud model across the region. Bradley objected repeatedly, trying to exclude the financial testimony, but Judge Reeves overruled him every time. Mr. Mitchell, this testimony goes directly to your client's credibility and pattern of abuse of authority. I'll allow it. By the time Henderson finished, the complete picture was clear. Karen Mitchell had spent years running a criminal enterprise disguised as HOA governance. Judge Reeves reviewed the materials in silence. Photos, letters, financial records, witness statements, video evidence. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system. Finally, she looked up. I'm denying the injunction in its entirety. Not only is there no legitimate basis for emergency relief, but the evidence demonstrates conclusively that the plaintiffs, not Mr. Say, Davidson, are the parties engaging in dangerous, illegal, and abusive behavior. Karen made a strangled sound. One of the board members put his head in his hands. Furthermore, Judge Reeves continued, tone hardening with each word, I am deeply troubled by what I've seen here today. This is not a property dispute. This is systematic harassment, criminal destruction, fraud, and abuse of authority. Mrs. Mitchell, your actions constitute willful felony property destruction, criminal trespassing, fraud in the inducement, embezzlement, and ongoing harassment. She consulted her notes. Based on the evidence, I am ruling that Mr. Davidson is entitled to full compensatory damages for the destroyed bridge, including replacement costs at current market rates, debris removal, lost use of property, legal fees, and additional damages for emotional distress and harassment. She did quick calculations. The total judgment is $47,500 to be paid by Oak Ridge Heights HOA within 30 days. Mrs. Mitchell is jointly and severally liable given her personal involvement. Karen's face went white as paper. Bradley started to stand, stopped halfway. Additionally, Judge Reeves said, I am ordering an immediate and comprehensive investigation into Oak Ridge Heights HOA's governance practices and financial management. The court will appoint an independent auditor to review all financial records for the past 7 years. If additional evidence of fraud or embezzlement is found, this court will not hesitate to impose further sanctions and refer matters for criminal prosecution. She fixed Karen with a look that could melt steel. Mrs. Mitchell, you came into my courtroom seeking an injunction after you destroyed his property. You have admitted to crimes on the record. You have demonstrated clear pattern of harassment, abuse of authority, and financial fraud. Consider yourself fortunate that I lack authority to file criminal charges directly, but I assure you I am forwarding complete copies of today's proceedings to the Gwinnett County District Attorney and Georgia State Attorney General for their immediate review. She banged her gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Judgment for the defendant on all counts. The injunction is denied with prejudice. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay all court costs and defendant's attorney fees. This case is closed. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters typed frantically. My neighbors hugged each other. Rebecca gathered materials with barely suppressed triumph. And Karen sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, rage, and finally something approaching genuine fear. Her perfect crimson blazer suddenly didn't look like armor anymore, just expensive fabric that couldn't protect her from consequences. As people filed out, I heard her hiss at Bradley, voice shaking with fury. How did this happen? You said we'd win. You admitted everything on the record. Bradley snapped back, real strain in his smooth lawyer voice. I told you not to speak. I told you repeatedly to let me handle testimony. You destroyed our entire case in 30 seconds with your ego and your inability to keep your mouth shut. But the community is about to discover you've been stealing from them for years, Bradley said coldly. Your reign is over, Karen, and quite possibly, you're going to prison. He started gathering files, slamming them into his briefcase. One of the HOA board members, the older woman who'd been trespassing that night, approached me quietly. Mr. Davidson, I need to apologize on behalf of the entire board. Karen lied to us about everything. She told us your property was within our jurisdiction, that you'd moved fence lines, that the bridge posed genuine danger. She showed us altered property maps, fake engineering reports. We believed her because she'd been our president for over a decade. We trusted her completely. She swallowed hard. We're calling an emergency board meeting tonight to remove her from presidency. We're cooperating fully with the county investigation, and we'd like to help you rebuild your bridge, not as an HOA, but as neighbors. We want to make this right. I looked at her genuinely remorseful face, at the other board members behind her looking equally devastated. They were victims, too, in a way. Victims of Karen's manipulation. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "Thank you." Outside the courthouse, the June sun felt different, brighter, like stepping out of a cave after months underground. Deputy Harris was waiting on the steps, grinning. "Hell of a show in there, Mr. Davidson. I've been in law enforcement 22 years. Never seen someone confess to multiple felonies in open court quite that spectacularly. What happens now with the criminal case, with her admission on record and all this evidence? The DA will absolutely prosecute. Multiple charges, property destruction, criminal trespass, fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Karen Mitchell is looking at serious prison time." "And Bradley's reputation?" Harris shook his head. "When word gets out, he filed a frivolous injunction and got destroyed in court. His career takes a major hit. Partners at big firms don't survive that kind of public humiliation." Rebecca stood beside me, looking more satisfied than I'd ever seen her. "Cole, that was about as perfect as a court hearing gets. She literally did our work for us. Confessed to everything, demonstrated criminal intent, showed complete lack of remorse. The DA is going to have the easiest prosecution of their career. What about the financial fraud? Henderson's testimony opened that door. The court-ordered audit will uncover everything. And if Karen's been teaching other HOAs, like Henderson said, this could trigger investigations across multiple counties. She might have accidentally exposed a massive fraud network." I looked back at the courthouse, watching Karen and Bradley emerge through the front doors. They were separated by several feet now, not talking, moving like two people who just realized their alliance was over. Karen's face was a mask, but I could see trembling in her hands, the slight stagger in her usually confident stride. For one moment, our eyes met. And in that brief connection, I saw everything: her hatred, her fear, her disbelief that she'd lost, her dawning realization that consequences were real. Then she looked away, adjusting her blazer one final time, and walked toward the parking lot on heels that seemed less steady. The HOA queen leaving her throne for the last time. I didn't feel triumph watching her go. Just exhaustion mixed with profound relief. It was over. The fight was done. Justice had worked exactly the way it was supposed to, and now I could finally start rebuilding. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching sunset paint the valley gold and crimson. My dog Copper lay beside me, head resting on my boots. Down at the creek, the destroyed bridge was still there, still broken, still a reminder of everything that had happened. But tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding it. Stronger than before. Better engineered. Built to last another 50 years. Dad would have been proud. Not of the fight, necessarily, but of the fact that I hadn't stayed down when someone knocked me over. That I'd gotten up swinging. That I'd protected our land, our legacy, our right to build things that mattered and have them last. "We did it, Dad," I said quietly, looking toward the creek. "We won." The breeze carried the smell of pine and creek water and Georgia summer. Copper's tail thumped once against the porch boards. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something close to peace. Karen Mitchell had tried to destroy my family's legacy. Instead, she destroyed herself. Justice wasn't always fast, but when it came, it was absolute. And that was enough.